بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Now before we look at the Arabic text regarding the section of Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha, there is one particular ruling or issue which needs to be clarified or discussed. And the issue is that, just say for example, if Eid was to fall on a Jummah or if Eid was to fall on a Friday, now the question arises is that is it permissible just to suffice on one of them? Do we just have to pray Eid and not pray our Jummah? Or is it obligatory and necessary that we pray both the Eid and the Jummah? Or again, is it sufficient that if we skip or miss the Eid Salah and pray the Jummah, would that be allowed or not? So we need to explain and clarify this particular issue. Now, according to Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah alayh, Imam Malik rahmatullah alayh, and Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, it is obligatory to pray both Eid and Jummah if Eid was to fall on a Jummah, if Eid was to fall on a Friday. So it's obligatory that you pray Eid firstly, and then afterwards you pray your Jummah Salah. However, according to Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahmatullah alayh, he says that if Eid was to fall on a Jummah, if Eid was to fall on a Friday, then it is sufficient just to pray your Eid Salah, and it's not necessary to pray your Jummah Salah in that particular situation and in that particular scenario. Now, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahmatullah alayhi, he uses this evidence or this particular proof which can be found in Sahih al-Bukhari and also in Imam Malik rahmatullah alayhi's Muwatta. It's a hadith narrated by Sayyidina Uthman ibn Anhu, that once during Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, Eid coincided with a Jummah. Eid fell on a Jummah, on a day of Jummah. So what happened was that after the companions, the Sahabas, they prayed their Eid Salah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then said to a certain group of people, he said to them, go back to your village and Jummah isn't obligatory upon you. Now, keeping this particular hadith in mind, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahmatullah alayhi has derived that if somebody was to just pray your Eid on that particular day and not the Jummah, then that would be sufficient. Now, the other scholars, they've interpreted this particular hadith by saying that this order of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that you don't have to pray your Jummah Salah, it wasn't said in general, meaning that this particular order was given to a specific group of people, and the specific group of people were those who came from the village and those travelers upon whom Jummah isn't obligatory in the first place. A couple of weeks ago, when we were looking at the conditions which are needed for Jummah to be obligatory, I mentioned that one of the conditions is that Jummah is obligatory upon those who are living within a city or those who are living in a big village. But those who are coming from small villages, Jummah isn't obligatory. And I also mentioned that Jummah is also not obligatory on a musafir and on a traveler. Now, this particular order which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave to those people, and he said that Jummah isn't obligatory upon you, he didn't just give general permission to everyone that, okay, you pray your Eid, now it's okay for you not to pray your Jummah, you can go back home and spend the Eid day. No, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave this particular command and order to those villagers, those travelers upon whom Jummah is an obligatory, and he said to them that, look, you've come all the way from the village, you've been here since the morning, so it's going to be difficult for you to pray your Jummah and then go back, the whole day is just going to go. So therefore, in that situation, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, acting upon some leniency and rukhsa, he said to them that, you go back to the village and Jummah is not obligatory upon you. So it wasn't like a general ruling or an order which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave. He gave a specific ruling to certain groups of people. And this is something which is not unique or something which is not different in Islam. There are many examples where there is a set rule, but for specific individuals or for specific situations, that particular rule is slightly wavered, or to say it's slightly relaxed. And an example of that we've already looked at before. If you remember, I mentioned that generally speaking, for every namaz you have to, when you break your wudu, you have to redo your wudu again, and that is obligatory for every namaz. That is obligatory when you come to touch the Quran and so on and so forth. However, certain people who have chronic illnesses, certain people who may have this problem of, say, discharge, they have this problem of continuously passing wind. So for them, there is a slightly lenient ruling. And the lenient ruling is that for each namaz time, if they were to just make one fresh wudu, so in that particular namaz time, irrespective of how many first prayers they are praying, irrespective of how many optional prayers they are praying, that one wudu would be sufficient. And even if in that namaz time or in that particular salah time, if they are passing wind, if they are bleeding, if they are discharging, semen or mazi and so on and so forth, then that will not break their wudu. Why? Because they are ma'zur and they have this particular chronic illness. We discussed this in the Sahara section earlier. Exactly here as well, that the general ruling is that Jummah is obligatory upon everyone, but for those people, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took the lenient option, and he said that, look, you've been here since the morning. He said to them that you don't have to pray your Jummah, you can return back to your village, and that would be sufficient. On top of that, there is also a hadith which can be found in Sahih Muslim, where it says that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is an explanation of this particular hadith, that when it says that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would pray or he would recite Sabbi Hisma Rabbika al-A'la for the first rakat, and Hal Ataka Hadithul Ghashiyah in the second rakat. And similarly, in a Jummah prayer, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would recite Sabbi Hisma Rabbika al-A'la in the first rakat, and Hal Ataka Hadithul Ghashiyah in the second rakat. And then the hadith goes on to say that if Eid and Jummah occurred on the same day, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would recite these in both the prayers. Now, from this particular hadith, is quite clearly saying that if Eid and Jummah was to fall on the same day, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would recite in the Eid prayer Sabbi Hisma Rabbika al-A'la and Hal Ataka Hadithul Ghashiyah, and in the Jummah on that same day, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam again would recite Sabbi Hisma Rabbika al-A'la in the first rakat, Hal Ataka Hadithul Ghashiyah in the second rakat. Quite clearly indicating that when Eid fell on the same day as a Jummah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would recite or would read both the prayers. Hence the recitation of Sabbi Hisma Rabbika al-A'la in the first rakat, Hal Ataka Hadithul Ghashiyah in the second rakat for Eid Salah, and also the same Sabbi Hisma Rabbika al-A'la and Hal Ataka Hadithul Ghashiyah for the Jummah Salah. So what we can derive from this particular hadith of Sahih Muslim, and also the general call for Jummah prayer as mentioned in the Holy Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu idha nudiya lis-salati min yawmil jumu'ah fas'aw ila dhikrillah. That hasten towards the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what we can derive from both is that if Eid was to fall on a Jummah, if Eid was to fall on a Friday, then it is obligatory to pray both the Eid Salah in the morning and also obligatory to pray the Jummah later on in the afternoon. Now we're now going to look at the Arabic text regarding Salatul Eidain. The first text which the author Imam Quduuri rahimahullah has brought is that it is mustahab and desirable that on Eid al-Fitr, i.e. the first of Shawwal, the Eid after the month of Ramadan, أن يطعم الإنسان شيئا قبل الخروج إلى المصلى, which means that it is desirable for a person to eat something before he makes his way towards the Eidgah or before he makes his way towards the masjid for the Eid Salah. It is mustahab and desirable that he eats something. Now, if you want to see adab or etiquette of Eid, as probably everyone is aware, that for Eid al-Fitr, before you make your way towards the Eid prayer, it's mustahab and desirable that you eat something. It could be anything, it could be something sweet, it could be anything like even chocolate or dates or anything like that. You should eat something before you make your way towards the Eid prayer. Whereas, as we're going to look at later, for Eid al-Adha, the one which we have on the 10th of Dhul Hijjah, then it's actually mustahab and desirable that you don't eat anything before you make your way towards the Eid prayer, but instead, after the Eid prayer, when the Qurbani and the sacrifice is being done, then the first thing you should eat or taste on that particular day should be the Qurbani. So in this particular text, it's telling us that it's desirable that you eat something before you make your way towards the Eid prayer. And another reason or wisdom for that is because obviously the 30 days prior to that, or 29 days prior to that, we have been fasting in the month of Ramadan. So when we woke up in the morning, we would wake up in the state of fasting. So to bring some kind of distinction and some kind of differentiation between the previous month, i.e. the month of Ramadan, when we would wake up in the state of fasting. So to show that this particular day, Eid al-Fitr, is a day of celebration, it's a day when eating, drinking and these kind of things are lawful and halal for us. So therefore Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would advise the companion that starts that particular day, even though you haven't prayed your Eid Salah yet, start it off by eating something sweet and then making your way towards the Eid prayer and towards the masjid for the Eid Salah. So that is one adab and one etiquette. Another etiquette which is being mentioned here is وَيَغْتَصِلُ, that it's also sunnah that you take a bath for Eid Salah. Number 3, وَيَتَطَيَّبُ, is that you apply some attar, you apply some fragrance. Number 4, وَيَلْبَسُ أَحْسَنَ ثِيَابِهِ, and that you wear the best of clothes. Now the author didn't say وَيَلْبَسُ جَدِيدَ ثِيَابِهِ, i.e. wear the new clothing or something like that. He used the word أَحْسَنَ ثِيَابِهِ. So from this we can understand that it's not necessary to buy new clothes for Eid. Okay, obviously if somebody wants to, then that's okay, or like a joyous occasion he wants to, but it's not something necessary, and certainly it's not a teaching from Islam. Okay, people, they want to buy new clothes for Eid, fair enough, they want to do that, but don't consider it to be a sunnah, or don't consider it to be a teaching of the Sharia. Because the teaching of the Sharia, the teaching of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the sunnah and the etiquette of that particular day was that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would advise and would say, wear the best clothes which you have available to you. So the best clothes, so it could be any old clothes, but as long as it's nicely been washed and it's nicely been ironed, say for example, then to wear that, then that is also sufficient as well. The next etiquette then goes on to say, وَيَتَوَجَّهُ إِلَى الْمُصَلَّى. Now after you've done all the preparation, you applied your fragrance, your attar, you've gone for a bath, so on and so forth, then the next thing is that you should make your way towards the Eidgah, towards the Eid Salah. وَلَا يُكَبِّرُ فِي طَرِيقِ الْمُصَلَّى عِنْدَ أَبِي حَنِيفَةَ رَحِمَهُ اللَّهِ. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi says that on the way towards the Eidgah, on the way towards the masjid for the Eid Salah, you should not say the takbir loudly. Now takbir here means, takbir again we looked at this last week as well, it's coming up later. The takbir for Eid, which is Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, Wallahu Akbar, Walillahi alhamd. So this particular takbir should not be said loudly when you are making your way towards the Eid prayer. The Eid prayer here we're talking about is the Eid al-Fitr prayer. When it's Eid al-Adha, then it's different. Then you should say it a bit loudly. But one of the others and etiquette is that you should say this particular takbir, but it should be said discreetly, quietly, within yourself, and it should not be said loudly. That is one of the adab and etiquette here stated by Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. The next ruling then goes on to say, وَلَا يَتَنَفَّلُ فِي الْمُصَلَّى قَبْلَ صَلَاةِ الْإِيدِ وَيَتَنَفَّلُ بَعْدَهَا. Now on the day of Eid, it's not permissible to pray any nafil salah, any optional salah, in the masjid before the Eid prayer. وَيَتَنَفَّلُ بَعْدَهَا. However, you can pray nafil salah after the Eid prayer. Now this is a very important ruling. One thing which needs to be highlighted here is that before the Eid Salah, so before the Eid congregation is about to start, you're not allowed to pray any nafil salah at all. And what I mean by nafal salah, I mean nafal in its general sense. So whether it's 2 rakats tahiyatul masjid, or 2 rakats salatul duha, or salatul ishraq, any type of nafal salah is not allowed before the starting of the Eid salah. And the main reason why is because on that particular day, Eid salah takes precedence over, or takes preference over the other prayers, other optional prayers. So therefore one should not combine or get both of them confused or mixed up. So therefore the scholars have said that any nafal prayers before the Eid salah, that is not allowed. Whether in the masjid and also whether at home as well. Okay, it's not allowed, it's not permissible. Now the question then arises regarding Fajr salah. Sometimes what happens is that, you probably realize as well that some people, they come for their Eid salah, but they haven't prayed their Fajr. So what happens is that they come to the masjid, they pray their 2 rakats Fajr first, and then they sit, they listen to the Imam's speech, bayan, thereafter then they participate in the Eid salah. So now the question is that, is one allowed to pray the 2 rakats Fajr qaza before the beginning of the Eid salah? Now the ruling is that in principle it is permissible. Like in terms of usul, in terms of principle, yes, you are allowed to do qaza of your Fajr before the beginning of the Eid salah, because the prohibition is regarding nafal salah and not regarding first. However, it should also be said at the same time that it's a teaching of the Sharia, it's a teaching of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that one should always conceal his sin. Your shortcomings, never expose your shortcomings to anyone. And this is something which is very, very important. Whether you're a scholar, whether you're an alim, whether you're an imam, or whether you're just like a normal person, who you think that, oh, it doesn't matter even if people find out I steal, or it doesn't matter if people find out if I commit adultery, even then you're not allowed to expose your sins, any of your shortcomings. But instead, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran, the Hadith, in many, many places they have told us to conceal our shortcomings. Now, if somebody has missed his Fajr Salah, it's a sin. It's a guna, there's no ifs or buts about it, there's no doubt about it, it's a sin. So now if you are coming into the masjid and you are now praying 2 rakat Fajr Salah, people are going to think that, look at this person here, he missed his Fajr. You know, they're going to think bad, even though that individual may self, that person himself may not have prayed his Fajr Salah, but when he looks, it's like you're exposing a sin. So therefore what you should do is that if you have missed your Fajr Salah on that particular day, do qaza of it at home and then come to the masjid. And if you think that, oh, you're a bit short of time, then fair enough, just come to the masjid, pray your Eid Salah, and then afterwards when you go home, then do qaza of your Fajr. But what you should not do is that in front of everyone, pray your 2 rakat Fajr and expose your sins of missing the Fajr Salah. You should not do that. So that is the ruling with regards to not praying nafal salah before the Eid salah. Then he goes and says, وَيَتَنَفَّلُ بَعْدَهَا. However, it is permissible to pray nafal salah afterwards. Now here this word afterwards here means afterwards at home but not in the masjid. So you can pray nafal salah after the Eid salah, but it should not be done in the masjid, but instead it should be done at home. So you keep this rule in mind. So nafal salah before the Eid prayer, that's not allowed, whether it is in the masjid or whether it is at home. And with regards to nafal salah after the Eid prayer, then it is allowed at home but not in the masjid. Now this particular ruling which I had mentioned, it should also be borne in mind that this particular rule is applicable for men only. For those people upon whom Eid salah is obligatory. This particular rule doesn't apply for women. Because upon women, as we mentioned before, Jummah Salah isn't obligatory and Eid Salah isn't obligatory. So for them, this particular rule doesn't apply. So just say, for example, if somebody, like a woman, says she wants to pray Salatul Ishraq or Salatul Duha around that particular time at home, then that would be totally permissible, that would be totally allowed. This particular rule is only applicable for men or for those people upon whom Eid Salah is obligatory. Similarly, just say somebody was living in the village and upon whom Eid wasn't obligatory, then for that individual he will be allowed to pray nafal salah before the Eid salah. That is totally allowed and totally permissible. The next text then goes on to explain to us how to pray the Eid Salah. So the author mentions that Eid Salah begins after sunrise, so not exactly straight away after sunrise, but 10-15 minutes after sunrise, when the sun is about to rise, then that's when the Eid Salah starts. And then he goes on to say, فَإِذَا زَالَتِ الشَّمْسُ خَرَجَ وَقْتُهَا. And when the time of Eid Salah finishes, when it becomes zawal. Zawal is that when the sun reaches its stationary point, when it reaches its zenith, which we call in Arabic istiwa shams. So at that particular time, that's when the Eid Salah finishes. So basically what we can gather is that the time for Eid Salah is from sunrise, 10-12 minutes after sunrise, all the way up to zawal time. So that 4, 5 hour, 6 hour period is the time to pray your Eid Salah. Now there's a ruling here which needs to be clarified, is for up to how many days one is allowed to delay his Eid Salah. Now the scholars have said that for Eid al-Fitr, so Eid al-Fitr, i.e. the Eid after the month of Ramadan, the first of Shawwal, it's only if there is a uzr or if there is an excuse, one is allowed to delay the Eid Salah to the next day, i.e. the second of Shawwal. And what I mean by uzr, what I mean by excuse is, just say for example, somebody on that particular day, he didn't see the moon for Shawwal the night before, so he thought, or that particular community or that group of people thought that, okay, today is the 30th of Ramadan, let's continue fasting. So they are fasting. And then it was after Zuhr they got the information that no, today was actually the first of Eid. Obviously it's not possible in this day and age, but in olden days this was something which was common and possible. So basically, after Zuhr, they get the information that today is actually Eid, the moon was sighted. Now, as I already mentioned, that after Zuhr, they can't get everyone together and pray Eid because the time of Eid has already finished. So therefore, what they can do is the next day, that whole group or that whole community would be allowed to pray Eid Salah together on the 2nd of Shawwal. So that is the only situation where you're allowed to delay the Eid Salah, the Eid al-Fitr, up to the next day. With regards to Eid al-Adha, because Eid al-Adha, the whole Eid is for 3 days, 10th, 11th and 12th, because that Eid is got to do with the Qurbani, with the sacrifice, and because the time of sacrificing is not just restricted to the 10th of Dhul-Hijjah, but it lasts for 3 days, the 10th, 11th and the 12th. So therefore, without any delay without any reason to delay the Eid al-Adha up to the 11th of Dhul-Hijjah, up to the 12th of Dhul-Hijjah, then that is something which is makruh tahrimi. However, if somebody did do it, the Eid will be correct. Okay, so again, the Eid al-Adha should be done bang on the 10th of Dhul-Hijjah. However, if for some reason, or without any reason, so I say they just delayed it up to the 11th and the 12th, and they say, okay, we get together on the 12th of Dhul-Hijjah and we pray our Eid Salah, then what they have done is makruh tahrimi, severely disliked, but the Eid Salah will be done. So what I'm trying to say is that for the Eid al-Adha, it can be delayed potentially up to 3 days, 10th, 11th and 12th. However, for Eid al-Fitr, the only time you can delay is if there is a uzr, if there is a particular excuse. If there isn't, then you won't be allowed to delay that particular salah. So that's what this particular text is telling us, that the time of Eid starts after sunrise and then it finishes at the time of zawal. And then it explains to us the procedure of praying Eid, as we discussed in last week's lesson, that there will be 2 rakat of Eid salah, and after the or in the first rakat, after the Imam does the takbir tahlima. So when the Imam does takbir tahlima, Allahu Akbar, all of you will then fold your arms, and then you will recite the Sana, Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, all the way to the end. Thereafterwards, the Imam will then say Allahu Akbar 3 times. Now the 3 times when the Imam is saying Allahu Akbar, you will then put your arms on the side. You won't fold it, but instead you will put it on the side. And this is quite important because again, a lot of people get mixed up here. Remember this principle, and that is that you only fold your arms if you are going to be reciting something. Generally speaking, that when you are in the standing position, qiyam and so on, the only time you will fold your arms is that if you are reciting something. So because after Takbir al-Tahrima we are going to be reciting the Salah, so therefore it is masnoon and it is a sunnah that we fold our arms and we recite the Salah. But thereafterwards, the 3 takbīrs which we then do, because we are not going to be reciting anything in between, hence it is a sunnah that we keep them on the side. So we then do the 3 extra takbīrs. The extra takbīrs which we do, we keep it on the side, and then on the 3rd takbīr, when the Imam says Allahu Akbar, we then fold our arms, and obviously we then hear the Imam recite Surah Fatiha, Surah. Thereafterwards, the 2nd rakat will start. Then at the beginning of the 2nd rakat, there will be Surah Fatiha and Surah. And then before the Imam goes into Ruku, in the 2nd rakat, then the Imam will again do 3 extra takbīrs. He will do 3 extra takbīrs. And again, as I mentioned, the procedure in the 1st rakat will be very similar in terms of he will say Allahu Akbar, he will put his arms on the side, he will say Allahu Akbar again on the side, 3rd time, he will say Allahu Akbar, the arms on the side, and the 4th time, when the Imam says Allahu Akbar, that will signify, or that will signal that this takbir is for the ruku, and everyone will go into the ruku. So basically there will be 3 takbīrs at the beginning, and 3 takbīrs at the end, and this is how the Hanafi scholars have said that you will pray your Eid Salah. Other schools of thought, as you're probably aware, according to the Shafi school of thought, they say that you do 7 takbīrs in the 1st rakat, and 5 takbīrs in the 2nd rakat. And the way they do it is like in the 1st rakat, after the Imam says his Takbir al-Tahrima and recites his Salah, they do 7 takbīrs straight away. And the 5 extra takbīrs they do in the 2nd rakat, they do it straight away after they get up from the sitting position. So in the 2nd rakat, before the Imam starts his Surah Fatiha and Surah, they do the 5 extra takbīrs then. We do the 3 extra takbīrs before we go into ruku of the 2nd rakat. They do their 5 extra takbīrs at the beginning of the 2nd rakat. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is the difference in opinions regarding how many takbīrs which you should do. It's one of those scholarly issues where you can't say that or Imam Sahib is wrong or Imam Shafi is right and so on and so forth. So therefore, if a Hanafi is praying behind a Shafi Imam who is doing 7 extra takbīrs in the 1st rakat and 5 extra takbīrs in the 2nd rakat, then it is permissible for a Hanafi to pray behind a Shafi in that particular ruling and in that particular masla. So you're allowed to do that. Similarly, other schools of thought, they have 6 takbīrs in the 1st rakat and I think 6 or 5 in the 2nd. So again, same rule applies that if a Hanafi is praying behind those people, then it will be permissible to follow them when it comes to the extra takbīr. The same way it is permissible for other schools of thought to follow Hanafi Imams when it comes to the extra takbīr. So the same also applies for when it comes to Hanafi followers to follow other schools of thought when it comes to the extra takbīr in the 1st rakat and in the 2nd rakat. The text then goes on to say that ثُمَّ يَخْطُبُ بَعْدَ الصَّلَاةِ خُطْبَتَيْنِ يُعَلِّمُ النَّاسَ فِيهَا صَدَقَةَ الْفِطْرِ وَأَحْكَامَهَا. So after the Eid Salah, the Imam now will then deliver 2 sermons and 2 khutbah. And in this particular khutbah, he will describe to people regarding the virtues of Sadaqah al-Fitr, and this is a section which we're going to look at later inshallah, and the rulings with regards to Sadaqah al-Fitr, who should give it, upon whom it is obligatory, who are the recipients, and so on and so forth. The next text thereafter then tells us about Eid al-Adha, and the author says that the same etiquette or adab which we have discussed regarding Eid al-Fitr also applies for Eid al-Adha in terms of it is a sunnah, it is an adab that you take a ghusl in the morning, wear the best clothes which are available, to apply athar, khushbu, these kind of things, fragrance, and they are also recommended. But the main difference, there are 2 main differences. They are, number 1, the eating of something should be delayed after the salah. As I would explain that in Eid al-Fitr, the eating should be done straight away before you make your way towards the Eid prayer, whereas for Eid al-Adha, the eating of something should be delayed after you pray the Eid Salah, so that the first thing which you should eat should be the Qurbani meat. And the second difference is that when it comes for the Eid al-Adha prayer, the takbir of Allahu Akbar should be said loudly. As I've explained before, that in Eid al-Fitr, that takbir on the way towards the masjid should be done quietly, but when it comes for Eid al-Adha, because that takbir has got to do with sacrificing and Qurbani and so on, so therefore that particular takbir should be said loudly all the way to the Eidgah and to the masjid for the Eid Salah. And then the author then goes on to mention that again there will be two sermons and two khutbahs, and in these two khutbahs يُعَلِّمُ النَّاسَ فِيهَا الْأُضْحِيَّةَ, that after the Eid al-Adha prayer the Imam will then teach people how to do the Qurbani and how to do the takbir tashriq. So that concludes the Eid Salah. The next section very quickly which we're going to look at is with regards to Salatul Kusuf, which in English means the prayer regarding the solar eclipse. Solar eclipse and lunar eclipse, the Salah and the prayer with regards to that. Now I'm just going to very briefly mention a few points with regards to this particular section. There are two words in Arabic. One is called kusuf and another one is called khusuf fakha. And whenever the word kusuf is mentioned, it means a solar eclipse. And whenever the word khusuf is mentioned, then it means a lunar eclipse. Now it is a sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that whenever there was a solar eclipse during his time, he would pray 2 rakat nafil salah. And it's mentioning the hadith which can be found in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's son, whose name was Ibrahim, and he was conceived from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's slave girl, whose name was Maria Qibtiyya radiyallahu ta'ala anha. So when Ibrahim passed away, on that particular day, there was a solar eclipse. Now the Arabs in those days, due to their superstitious beliefs and due to their ignorance and jahala, they would assume that solar eclipse happens when there is a death of a great person, or when a great person is born. That's when solar eclipses happen. They would think that a solar eclipse is a sign from God that a great person is about to be born, or a great person has passed away. So what happened was, the day when the solar eclipse happened, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's son Ibrahim passed away. Now when you look at it, obviously Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not going to do that, but just say, if we were to look at it hypothetically, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam could have used that solar eclipse to his advantage. He could have said that, yeah, look, I'm a prophet of Allah, look, my son has passed away, hence there's a solar eclipse. And obviously the Arabs, believing on that superstitious belief, they would have said, yes, he is the prophet of Allah, he's the messenger of Allah, let's believe in him, let's accept him, let's accept him to be the Rasul and the messenger. But instead Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he didn't do that, he didn't use that to his advantage. He then made it clear, as mentioned in the hadith, that these solar eclipse, lunar eclipse, they are signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where he uses it, يُخَوِّفُ اللَّهُ بِهَا عِبَادَهُ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses these lunar eclipse, solar eclipse to warn his servants, to scare his servants. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that, look, these solar eclipses is not because of my son Ibrahim passing away, but it's a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to everyone that you need to be praying 2 rakat nafil salah when this particular thing happens. Now the way you pray your solar eclipse salah, or Salatul Kusuf, is exactly same as a normal 2 rakat nafil salah. The only difference is that, generally speaking, when you pray nafil salah, you don't do it in congregation, but you do it by yourself. But for a solar eclipse prayer, it's actually sunnah and it's masnoon that you pray in congregation. And also the recitation should also be done loudly as well. So most of the time this particular prayer will be done in the morning when the solar eclipse happens. So So to get everyone together in the masjid and to pray 2 rakat nafil salah, then that is considered to be desirable and that is considered to be a sunnah. With regards to a lunar eclipse, because a lunar eclipse tends to happen at night, and sometimes very late at night, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's difficult to get everyone to the masjid, so therefore, again, it is advisable that you pray 2 rakat nafil salah, but that 2 rakat nafil salah should be done by oneself, either individually and not in a congregation. So what we can derive from the sunnah is that to pray a solar eclipse salah in congregation, that is the sunnah. However, to pray lunar eclipse salah individually, that is the sunnah, and it should not be done in a jamaat, and it should not be done in a congregation. Another ruling here, which the scholars have then derived, is that whenever or wherever there is a musibah or a calamity which has befallen Muslims or which has befallen a particular individual, or if a particular individual is scared, he's, paranoid, you could say, he's anxious that something may happen to him, then in that situation it is also desirable to pray 2 rakat nafil salah. And this was again the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that whenever he would apprehend that something bad may happen, whenever he would see black clouds in the horizon, whereas other people would be thinking, oh, this is like some rain coming and so on, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, fearing that this could be azab and punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he would go to the masjid and pray 2 rakat nafil salah. And there are many examples where, for example, if it was very, very windy, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would pray 2 rakat nafil salah. We will not think, oh, nice breeze today, no. We actually go and pray 2 rakat nafil salah, because wind and these are things which Allah used to destroy people. So whenever it's really, really windy, or similarly all of a sudden you may, sometimes like all of a sudden it gets really dark, especially during the day, like it's all of a sudden it's a nice bright day, and all of a sudden in the afternoon it gets all of a sudden really, really dark, and it starts thunder and lightning and so on. Even then, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would go to the masjid and pray 2 rakat nafil salah. So what we can derive is that whether it's solar eclipse prayer, lunar eclipse prayer, whether it's any situation where you're thinking that something bad may happen, azab or a punishment may come about, then the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was that he would pray 2 rakat salah. Obviously for the solar eclipse prayer, it was prayed in jamaat, in congregation, but the other prayers he would do it by himself. So that was the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Inshallah, we'll just leave it there for this week. Like tawfiq back to one of them said, wa alhamdulillah rabbil alamin. Now, as promised,